Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Executive Career Chats, powered here by Chameleon Resumes. And I'm so excited that you are all here with me and our guest and Krista here today. I'm Lisa Rangel of Chameleon Resumes, and I'm super thrilled that you're here for us today. We're talking about maximizing compensation today in this uncertain world. And I'm super honored to have we're getting this from an executive search perspective. Our guest today is Kurt Jeskulski, Executive Director at Michael Page. And I'm just super excited. Hi, Kurt. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So we're just going to go through some rules of the road. I'm also going to introduce Krista. If you have any trouble getting in today, or if you have any trouble through the presentation today, please email Krista at chameleonresumes.com. She will let you back in if you need to, or if you have any trouble with anything, you just let us know. We're here to help. I encourage your questions in the chat. We're going to do our best to answer them as we go through the process today. And Kurt and I know each other. It's got to be, I don't know,
25 years.
25 years.
Yeah, I would guess so.
We were both recruiting in Manhattan, friendly competitor type of situation. And just as I launched Chameleon, you started a supply chain division at Michael Page, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
that's the
19 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is awesome. So I'm super excited. Tell us just a little bit about you and why you're here, and then we'll jump into everything in terms of maximizing compensation in this very nebulous, uncertain world today, and offering the insights from the executive recruiter's perspective. I'm super excited.
Well, thanks, Lisa. First, at the end of the call, I will send out salary guides if you folks find that helpful. I was just trying to toggle through my phone right now, and I'm not great at multitasking, so it's probably better for me to do it
I
at
think
the
it's
end.
overrated, so don't worry.
Uh, Agreed. So I'll be 21 years at Michael Page actually this month. I run the United States and Canada. Where it's multiple vertical lines, including construction, supply chain, and procurement, accounting and finance, financial services, several different practices across North America. When I talked to you, we talked about a couple different topics that came to mind, and AI seems to be on everybody's mind. So that's really the last thing I want to talk about.
Amen.
And
Same.
the conversation, yeah, yeah, exactly right. And it's going to destroy our industry apparently. But in that same vein, though, compensation seems to be a really hot topic, specifically because of some of the laws associating certain states, and this gap between middle management and senior management, and how we compensate those individuals. And then what's the difference between, and we talked about this, an individual who gets lowballed versus somebody who maximizes their earning potential. And
Mhm.
so that's how we got to this point.
Right.
And so I'm looking forward to this conversation today. And uh, as a side note, um, I didn't just rely on thinking about the people that I hire in the organization. I talked to quite a few of our executive search consultants to see and get their vibe on what they're hearing and seeing in the marketplace. And
Right.
and it seems like the trends are pretty standard across the board.
So, we're going to talk about some of those trends. The goal here is to inspire everybody on the call to, have ideas, leverage points, levers you can pull in your negotiations. But I think it's important to emphasize that, and we were talking about this in preparation for this, is that, compensation negotiations is incredibly nuanced. And what
Yeah.
we're going to talk about here today is, very general information, although applied in certain ways for each specific situation can truly be a lever to use, can be a negotiation point to employ, and that's the goal here today. But it's incredibly nuanced, and what might be a rule for one scenario might be the opposite thing you need to do for another scenario, and I think that's all very important, a very important perspective to share. None of this should just be applied blindly. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the other thing that's interesting about the compensation conversation is, at the very least, as every candidate goes through this process, it's very telling on how they fit in,
Right.
right? And you'll see it, and um, it's an opportunity. more than people know, to really listen and peel back the onion on how much are they wanted, and not only how much are they wanted, what is the company willing to do. And today's conversation, I think, is uniquely powerful in the fact that, and again, I think you talked about it originally in the titling. I don't want to make it a rah rah opportunity, but there is a shortage
Right.
of top
This is one of the
leadership and
trends.
talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely the trend. And I wrote down a couple things I think that are relevant
Hmm.
before I forget,
Yeah,
specifically
let's go
around
through
the
them.
shortage and the things that people need to think about. One, boomers are retiring, right? They held off retiring around the pandemic, and now they're making their move. Gen X is simply a smaller population. There are changing expectations about work life balance, which I think is playing a role in the decisions that people make on whether they want to be leaders or not. There's been an erosion of the middle management. We talked about that earlier before this call, between layoffs, consolidations, cost containment. There's just a simple middle management erosion. And what does that mean? That means succession planning becomes that much harder.
Right.
There's
They're
a
not ready.
rise in they're not ready, right?
They're not
And
prepared for the next level. Right.
they're not prepared. And then on top of it, you have many folks that are simply not raising their hand. I have a speaker coming to talk to my director population in September. And that individual is just about to retire, and he is a full colonel in the military.
Hmm.
And you think to yourself, well, what is the relevance of all of this? Everything that we're talking about today, he's experiencing, but in the military. Things
Right.
like a gap between senior leadership and middle management, burnout. They don't have matrix management, but that's an issue in the world that we see
Right.
from an executive standpoint. So all those things mean he has many individuals who originally went for leadership roles who've now slowly taken their hand down and said it, in some regards they feel it's not worth it. So he has a generation of folks that he had assumed would be his replacement as he retires, and he
Hmm.
worries about what the next generation looks like.
Right. Yeah, and I think these trends are important for people to note. You might be in an industry where there's an abundance of next level leaders. You might be in an industry where this is absolutely applicable. Um, the overall trend may not be applicable to your little
Yeah,
economic world, but these are things to keep in mind as you're starting to position yourself for your own negotiation. And a lot of what we're starting to talk about here today is applicable whether you're looking for a raise, a promotion or a new job, compensation structure. And it's just a matter of which levers you can pull. I think knowing the macroeconomic trends is important for you to then approach your own situation. But this is, key. What are you seeing as a key driver or trait or collection of traits of people who are negotiating well in this economy? Like what are some scenarios that you're seeing?
I think ones that go in with the right mindset to start.
And how would you define that?
I think flexible. At the end of the day, you're not going to take the offer if it's not right.
Hmm.
So if you go in with an open mindset, and a very open communication style, with a
Hmm.
view that you want to get to an outcome, and you help to steer that outcome through a very good interview process and identifying the pain points that the organization has, and then of course being able to sell that you can deliver on those pain points. You position yourself well nicely to get to the offer stage, because half the battle is you have to get the offer first. But
Hmm.
my genuine view is, when you get the offer, if you get the offer, it's often quite telling. But the end result is, to get that far in the process, and in a market where it's very candidate short right now, clients have to be aware, if they're, and you need to be aware, if you're at the point of an offer stage, there's an emotional attachment associated with that.
Hmm.
So you have a leverageable moment, but it starts right out of the gate with being in the right mindset, which is one that is flexible and open to dialogue, multiple compensation scenarios, and those are the ones that I think are getting the best return on their time in.
So you actually said something that struck me. You just said in a candidate short environment. I would wonder if many on the call would disagree with that, feeling like they can't get attention. But how would you qualify a candidate short environment in the climate that we're in, where people feel like there's stepping over people left, right, and center as competitors for roles?
Well, there's 4.2% unemployment, right?
Right.
And there's no doubt that the process is taking a little bit longer for
Hmm.
everyone right now, but that is only because people are paralyzed by the uncertainty of the climate, right?
Right.
If a little more stability, an interest rate cut, and you'll see we're going to take off like a rocket. I genuinely believe that. We've been in
Hmm.
2 years of kind of this malaise, but if you look back at in time, 4.2% unemployment is ridiculously low, right?
Hmm.
Then, as we talked about before, there's simply just a shortage of good talent out there, and you have a lot of
Right.
talent that is retiring. The end result in all that is, yeah, we are candidate short. Now, clients are being very particular about what they want, but the good news is when they find what they want, which may be somebody on this call, you have an opportunity to leverage that.
Right.
And if they found you in a climate that's challenging and it's hard to find good candidates,
Mm.
that's the moment to pounce when it comes to um, going through a negotiating process. And I think that's the reality. Now, again, every scenario is nuanced, right? And depending
Right.
on the
Right.
skill set that you're in, that
Right.
you have, of course, demand is a factor. But yeah, there's absolutely a candidate shortage. We talk about it all the time here at the company.
I think it's like it's a qualified candidate shortage, and that's not
Sure,
just a skill set, but I think it's also how candidates present themselves. Are they presenting themselves in a way that is digestible to an employer, saying, I'm the one that's qualified to do this, and here's how, right? So it's a probably a twofold process, right? Maybe even threefold. The employer needs to present it the right way, right? The candidate needs to present it the right way, and then somewhere in the middle, they need to be able to communicate. And I think between some of the systems on one side, that's probably a whole nother discussion for another call, but there is a shortage of
yeah, for sure,
perception of qualified people. And as candidates approach companies, I firmly believe that the negotiation process really starts from like the first approach or the first interaction between a
it
candidate
does.
and employer. And I know when I recruited, there was people that you came to me and I would have an instinct that I can lowball this person. And then there's other people who would approach me and I could have a vibe that I'm going to probably have to pull out the big guns for this
Well, I think
recruit.
that's a really
So, I
fair
mean, and I still
and
think that exists today. So,
yeah, it
thoughts?
does. Yeah, I mean, it's a candid conversation, and I think it's like anything else. It is that aura that you give off, right? That the level of confidence about you that I won't accept anything but the best, as
Right,
opposed to some individuals don't give that quite off the same way, and that insecurity
right,
comes through. And I don't know that that's something that's a coachable or not coachable. But I think to your point, I think the negotiation, yeah, you could argue it starts long before they ever meet with the particular
right.
employer. It starts with understanding, and you want to get away from that knowing your worth. We assume everybody in this call has already done the research to understand what the market bears.
And if you haven't, you should.
More about, and I guess some of it today was about also reminding. If you haven't, you should for sure, but
Right,
reminding you that there is a market shortage. Now, look, that doesn't mean every role is going to be right for you. We all
right,
get that, but in your particular skill set, whoever that is and whatever that is, if you've been a leader with any kind of qualifications that make you accomplished, there will be a demand for you. It's finding the right opportunity and then leveraging it from there. But yeah, you can't deny that people sniff out who who is more flexible than others. And I think, look, you can be flexible in mindset. It doesn't mean that you need to come across as somebody who is not confident and feels comfortable that they're going to find the right opportunity at the right
I'm
time.
glad you said that because, there's a few people in the chat that are like, insecurity is coachable. Absolutely agree with that 100%. And I think part of that comes from being knowledgeable about what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in a particular employer, and then about yourself and being confident in how you present yourself, right? That's all very coachable. I know I didn't present myself the same way I did 30 years ago, and thank God for that, right? So, I do think that's all very coachable. You know, with that said, the being able to connect the dots between what is existing in the marketplace and how you make a difference, that's, I think, a lot of times up to the candidate and
Yeah.
up to the candidate to make the employer see it, in a diplomatic manner, of course. And that's like, because we've talked about the trends, we've talked about the economics, even with the unemployment being 4.2, like I've always believed that the number, whether it goes up or down, doesn't matter. You just need one job. And even if net hiring is negative, hiring is never zero. So
Yeah,
you
agreed.
you always you just need the one job. So just focus on the one, knowing, the scenarios and the economics and the trends, but knowing how you present yourself and all of that. Um, I think that's key.
Yeah, I think you're
The
right.
what are some ways that you see, right? When somebody looks like they can be the candidate that can be lowballed, right? Like what are some of those traits, trends, patterns? Like what are some of that? Because this is what we want to correct. We can only control what we can control
Yeah.
on our end from a candidate side.
Well, can I go back to maybe the fix, and then I'll go back to that for a
I
second?
think that's perfect. That's great.
Okay. I think the
I am
fix is
flexible.
I think that thank you, and that's a starting point. I think the fix starts with everybody at a senior level and an executive level realizing that you're all in sales. And
Right.
the quicker you realize that you can't get to that level without selling, the
Hmm.
quicker you'll realize that even the interview process and the negotiation is a sales process, right? So part of the sales process, and the best sales professionals that we know in recruitment's 100% sales, is two ears and one mouth and asking open-ended questions to elicit a response that gives us a comfort level that we
Right.
understand that the questions that we're asking will get us to an answer that identifies clients' pain points,
Right.
right? So if it is a sales process, confidence comes through asking really good questions that require the employer, if you will, to come back and explain what's not working in their environment or what could be better, which affords the opportunity for the candidates, the professionals, the executives to then form their own sales pitch around how they could fill in that gap. By doing that, they eliminate any concerns of the employer, identify what the pain points are, even if the employer maybe couldn't identify those, and then subsequently sell to it. So you eliminate the issue around the individual coming across as maybe a little bit insecure, right?
Right.
I think that's where it starts. It starts with every interview is a sales cycle. And how are
It
you
is.
going to maneuver through that sales cycle? And that from the first time you have a conversation to the end in any sales organization, I mean, it sounds terrible. You talk about, you go back to the 80s and the 70s and always be closing. And I'm not suggesting it's quite that dramatic, but there needs to be this understanding that if you really think the opportunity is there for you and you have an open and flexible mindset, then you need to be constantly selling with the view that your end game is to get the job. Your
Right.
end game is to get that product sold. Then you identify how you can get it across the line, as in the salary that you want, the compensation, and utilizing open ended comments to get there, i.e., our clients who will say, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for an opportunity that pays me a really strong base salary, bonus, long term compensation, and really good benefits, and not really getting into the specifics around that, understanding that the flexibility comes in the nuance of every job having a slightly different breakout, but understanding what you actually want by talking to them about from a macro perspective as a starting point.
And I
I know that
want
was
to,
long winded.
no, no, that was absolutely perfect. And I typed a summary of it in the chat for everybody. I want you to realize that everyone, Kurt didn't bring up anything about a credential or years of experience. And I'm not implying in any way, shape, or form that years of experience or your educational or work credentials don't matter. But the shift that most of us need to make in this senior level, um, whether you're an executive or senior level professional bracket, is not pitching how much experience you have or not pitching where you've worked, but pitching how you can solve a problem
Yeah.
or capitalize on an opportunity. And when you shift your discussion points to in that manner, you now come across like a business solutions person and not someone who's just touting years of experience, hoping to be paid for something historical. That's, I think, really a nuance. That if there is a general nuance you can walk away with from this presentation, is that is shifting your discussion points, your star stories, a lot of the situations here that where you show how you are a business advisor, regardless of what your title is, versus somebody who's just touting experience and credentials. I feel like that's a big difference sometimes too.
I think so. I mean, I don't know what your view is. My feeling is if the client has agreed to interview you, they've already at the very baseline established that in theory your credentials, your background aligns with what they're looking for. So then it's a deeper dive on the things that they can't see on the paper,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's where the opportunity sits. And if the folks on this call and anyone out there can peel back the onion on where their pain points are, I think that's super critical. And I
Right.
would guess, and it's just speculative, but I would guess a lot of the pain points involve emotional intelligence. A lot of the pain points right now involve leadership that can manage through change.
Hmm.
These are the skill sets that the I think there will be in tremendous demand over the next couple of years because we have a lot of folks that haven't experienced that, right? And a lot of that experience is walking out the door and retiring right now.
Right.
So being able to hone in on that is super super critical.
No, and I, there's a comment in the chat from Monica about, CFOs with more than 20 years of experience, but HR tools reject them. And at risk of sounding targeted, this to me is about what you just talked about, embracing change. I think that if a tool isn't working for you, then someone who embraces change goes, if something isn't working, then you've already intuitively figured out how to get a different audience.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I know from our work, the CFOs are probably some of the most in demand people because the decrease of CPAs and the decrease of accounting majors and there's a lot less. So there's the few people that have both CPAs and finance combinations to become a CFO eventually are in demand. And so it comes down to if you're not finding something as a CFO, you're not marketing yourself the right way. And marketing yourself the right way is contributory to landing a great compensation package. This is where it comes back to like the first approach. So
I
if your
think
first
so.
approach is only going through job boards, that to me is one of those scenarios where you are doing sort of a lowbrow way of applying. So people may assume that they can lowball you because you're not networking your way in, which is a little bit more savvy and shows that you may have um, a more sophisticated approach of getting companies and getting into companies and getting connections. I mean, it sounds small, but I just think it matters. At
I
least that's
think
what
it
I'm seeing.
does. And I think there's a strategy around that. I mean, and we could go
Right.
on
That's a
that
little bit of a
particular
different
topic.
tangent,
That's a
but
little bit. I mean, I don't have Monica's profile in front of me, but I'm listening to what you said on that, and I'm sure there's some truth to what
yeah.
she said. I have absolutely no doubt
Oh no,
about that.
the frustration is
That's a valid.
absolutely validated.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
But
that at
but what
all.
I but what I would say is that that would probably be targeted to a larger organization
Hmm.
because any middle management or sub $50 billion company is not going to have technology that's set up that way.
Right.
And so I think the next question then becomes, is there an opportunity in there? Because what you can gauge out of that is probably her brand is bigger than some of the brands that she could be maybe targeting herself to.
Right. Right.
Like I used to always love the organizations that I work with that nobody ever heard of the name, but they're $1 billion in size, right?
Right.
Because they needed me oddly in a way that Google didn't,
That
right?
Google didn't.
And
Right.
and
Exactly.
so when you I talk to these candidates, I go, well, are you always going after name brands? Because then you're kind of competing with the same pool of people, but there's an entire world of companies that service those main brands.
Yeah.
That is a complete strategy in and of itself, right? I mean, it took me years ago. Years ago, I learned we have an entire practice that's devoted. And I'm getting way off topic, but real quick, and I'll bring it back in. That we have an entire practice that places senior level sales professionals in the packaging industry,
Hmm.
multi-billion-dollar packaging companies you've never heard of that package all the products for Chanel, so forth and so on. There's
Right.
an entire cottage industry around that. You'd never know about it because
You
you've
don't
never
know
heard
them.
of the brand. They need you. They would love somebody that came from a brand because you would have never heard of their brand.
Right.
So anyway, as a side note, but going back to the compensation piece, I think there's a strategy that's tied to it. The good news is, and we talked about this earlier, is there's two outcomes here. Either they're gonna compensate you in alignment with where you want, or they're not. So the good news is, if you got to the offer stage, you find out how they really feel. Either it's a situation where the organization can't afford to pay what you want,
Right.
or they could afford to pay you what you want, but they don't value enough to do so. And at the very least, you have an understanding of what you're dealing with there when you go
Right.
through that process. What I can encourage people to do from a flexibility standpoint is be very careful about the information that they give in a climate that we're in, because whatever you give, you can never get back. Right.
Hmm.
So, if you're looking for a salary of 250 grand, I assure you, you're not getting 255. So, knowing that as a baseline, when you go through this negotiation process, I think
Hmm.
it's really important to leverage it with, you want a full comprehensive package, and that you're looking at multiple scenarios, and the packages are uniquely different depending on certain factors, i.e.,
Right.
long-term compensation, i.e., equity, i.e., bonus versus salary. And what it says to them is, you're flexible, but the whole package needs to be
Has to
there.
make sense. Right.
Yeah.
And that the flexibility piece, I think, is really, really important there. What are some of the other, components that you can ask? What are some of the other components that you suggest people can ask for more, or you've seen work for other people if, salaries um, either somewhat fixed or, we were talking before when we were prepping just even about the variable piece, how
Yeah.
much, if you're offering as a candidate, even variable components based on milestones to get something higher, at least you're, showing that you're proposing skin in the game, right? So, I mean, what are some
Yeah.
trends around that too?
So I think uh, it, it's a really good question. I think that the first thing I would say is, you have to measure and think about your own appetite,
Hmm.
right? What are you comfortable with, and what is
Right.
what does risk look like for you? At one point in your career, you may be far more risk adverse than in another part of your career, and that is a consideration when you look at compensation, right? And I think you have to be honest with yourself on that. You
Right.
think about most executives right now, they have skin in the game, and that they're tied to the performance of the overall business. Well, I think it is a point of consideration on how is that business performing when you're about
Hmm.
to get an offer from them, because your bonus may be tied to the performance of a business that you have yet to contribute to, but may impact your pocketbook. So these are
Hmm.
all things that I think that you need to consider. Yes, I mean, I talk to folks all the time, some who are really happy taking a slightly lower base for upside potential, right? I.e., a startup situation. Maybe the nature of the work itself gets them fired up. And for that
Right.
reason, they're actually willing to take a lot less on the front end, with the view that if they deliver, they'll get paid on the back end. And then I talk to some other folks that are at a stage in their life where they're going, no, I'm 10 years. I got 10 years left, Kurt.
Right.
And in those 10 years, I need to be paid on the front end. These are my earning years, and I can't afford to run the risk that I can't deliver, or that the company can't deliver. So I
Right.
think those are all things that need to be considered, and what your appetite is for risk. Benefits is usually unchanged for the most part
Right.
in this day and age. You can't modify benefits
Hmm.
much. Equity, long-term compensation, these are all things to think about. A sign-on bonus if there is a risk associated with it, and or if you're walking away from an
Right.
existing situation where you have a bonus. So these are
Hmm.
all areas, I think, of flexibility. Um, the other thing that I think that we all need to consider is, when was the last time you got a salary increase? And state by state, it's a little bit different. Some states can still ask what your current salary is, others can't,
Right.
and
Others
these are
can't.
considerations that you need to think about as well.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of factors involved in that. I'd like to say there was one set recipe on delivering on that. I've seen some people get 10% increases in this current climate. I've seen people get 30% increases. So
Right.
I think it varies, right? And so these are the things I think you need to, in your mind, probably set a goal.
Right.
Where do you want to get to, and what does the total package look like, and what's the walkaway point for you? And so if you set that goal and at a minimum standard, you can look at that, then you try to work it back in your negotiation.
And then look at the pockets of environments where that could exist. There's a bit
That's
of a
right.
chat going on about, smaller companies, startup companies don't value experience. It's like, I don't know if they don't value experiences. Maybe they're just acknowledging they can't afford it. So they're getting the best
Yeah, I
that they
think so.
can, or they're getting people who are willing to take a bit of a financial leap by taking less for more equity later. And
Yep.
I think not internalizing it and just viewing it as a market situation. Okay, so maybe that's not where, if you need a big package that is paid up front, then maybe small startups aren't your people, and that's okay. So I think it's also defining what you want and then looking at the audiences. This is a marketing exercise, right? Like you said earlier, it's a sales process. You can't sell something to a prospect that doesn't need or isn't interested or can't afford what you are pitching. So you got to go find the
Oh, that's
people,
exactly right.
aka the companies, that are at least open to what you want to be pitching and not view the ones that can't do what you do as a personal affront. Because I think that helps your mindset.
Yeah,
If you
I'll
just
double
accept
down on
that,
that for you. I'll double down on that for you too.
yeah,
And this may be uh, people might not like hearing this. If you're in a situation where you have years of experience and you're looking at an organization that is smaller in size or startup, and you're worried about whether they want your skill set, they want your skill set. They they probably chances are they can't afford you, but you never get the conversation. I will tell you right now, if you're working with a recruiter, you're not, because that company has already told the recruiter they can only pay X.
and now there's a fee on top of it.
And now there's a fee on top of it. You're never getting there that way. So if you're going to do the research to get into those organizations who, by the way, might want your skill set and might be open-minded and probably would be open-minded to working out something with you can't go through a recruiter. That's not the
Right.
avenue. It's just
Exactly.
too expensive for them, right?
Yeah.
They're already counting their pennies in the early stages of that. So then to have to pay a fee on that, it would
So
be difficult for them to justify it, even though your
approach
skill set
them
aligns
directly.
quite well. You have to report. You need to go to them directly. That's an absolute. When you go to a recruiting firm in particular, they're only paying a fee if you tick all the boxes. That's just how it
Yeah,
works.
that's how it works.
And that is how it works. Do you know, and for you folks on this call, and it's separate to this, but important to know, a good recruiter maybe places one person a month, maybe two.
Yeah.
A good one. Okay. I want you to think about how many people they meet in the course of the year to place 24 to 30 people in a year.
Probably, I mean, I always say they're placing at less
500?
than five. Yeah, I say they're placing less than 5% of the people they meet.
Without a
That's
doubt,
huge.
without a doubt. And so it's a sidebar, but I think it's worth noting because when I talk with senior level executives, often from all walks of life, and they talk to me
Hmm.
about their experiences and where they're going and where they're not going, I'm going, look, you need to pick your lane in your sweet spots where you tick all the boxes. You should be utilizing recruiters. That makes sense. But you should also have another lane where actually the one where you tick the boxes on the skill set, but probably the size of the organization, your brand is bigger than theirs. You need to go to them directly. That's the
Exactly.
only way
And
it's going to work.
so I'm going to add a third part to what you just said, or what you just said. I'm going to add a third part. So it's not only you being defined on what you want and then going to find where what you want can possibly exist. You
That's
now
right.
need to then do the method in which to reach
To reach
that
that's
particular
right.
employer that has possibly the environment to support what you're looking for. Because like you said, if you can do something and you don't check all the boxes today, a recruiter's not going to be able to help you, but that doesn't mean you can't get hired directly. And frankly,
That's
60
right.
to 65% of hires happen through networking without a recruiter
Oh, well,
anyway. So that's
that's right.
a better, that's this,
It's a
the
better outcome for
conversation
everybody.
here is really about what is your positioning to get what you want. This is,
That's right.
in entrepreneurship, they say it's the timing of the offer, the audience, and the offer. So
That's
it's the
right.
right time, the right audience, and the right offer. So you have to package yourself in a way to the right employer at the right time, aka the right method. And if you're not willing to do the search, and you're not networking, and you're only wanting to have a recruiting firm place you, Well, then recruiting firm is only going to be place you based on what you've been doing, and it's not going to be doing anything new. Like you have to
That's
just think
right.
of the economics of it all. And that all
That's
plays
right.
into how you ask for compensation too.
And if you really want to maximize your compensation, you must make them love you.
Yes.
And that's the key. And so the process that the sales process that you go through, you need to get to the finish line with them feeling, not necessarily that they can't do without you, but pretty darn close, right?
Right.
And so that's everything from connecting with them on a personal level to connecting with them and fitting the needs that they have. But the people I know that leverage the most, these folks look at them and think, not only can they do a job for me, but I actually like them.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think you can underestimate likability. You can't underestimate that you work with these people 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And don't you
Hmm.
want to be surrounded by like-minded individuals? Of course you do. And those all play factors into the negotiation.
Right.
And look, they do. I can tell you right now, most of the organizations don't want to go through the process again. They don't want to get to the final line to have you reject it because it doesn't work for you compensation wise for them to start all over again. But what I can tell you is that if they are splitting hairs over 5 or 10 grand, one of two things: either they don't think you're perfect, or they have a number two.
Yeah. And that's all part of the economics, right?
It's part of the
These are
economics,
all part of the,
and you
I
have to
know when
weigh
I go,
that.
and this is not an executive context, but it exists everywhere. When I went to the hotel school at Cornell and everybody wanted to work at Four Seasons when we graduated and because it was the best hotel company. So like you couldn't negotiate your starting salary because they were
No,
like, if you can take it, there's 15 people behind you who will take exactly what we're offering, if not less. So, if you're going to a popular employer, even with an incredible skill set, you know, you may not have as many levers as opposed to say that no name company that's very big behind everything. They may not have as many options to consider, so you have more levers to pull in getting what you want. Again,
yeah,
going
totally.
through a recruiter, not going through a recruiter. These are
Yeah,
all angles that one needs to consider in their own specific situation. There's no magic, here's the negotiation tactic to get what you want every situation. That doesn't exist.
absolutely,
It's about,
absolutely.
looking at the entirety of it all and see where you can push and pull based on what's happening. On the flip side, likability, all of that, you work with people a long time. Let's talk about the flip side of that, loyalty. Because
Yeah.
eventually they like you, they know you're going to be there, they know you're not going to ruffle the feathers, rock the boat, all those sayings. How does that then loyalty start to flip into being a detriment versus an asset? Because
Well,
because
I
again,
have a
the
slightly
conversation
different,
of all this is
yeah,
not
I have a
just
slightly different
landing a
view.
job, but also so anyway, go ahead.
I have very strong opinions on that.
Hmm.
And I'm
Bring
biased
it.
because I'm 21 years here,
Right.
right? Which I think loyalty in the current climate is currency. And I think if you can demonstrate that you have worked for organizations and you've been a loyal comrade, I think that goes a long way because you live in a world now where I think I read somewhere the average person is going to have 11 jobs in a lifetime.
Right.
A lot of these jobs require training people up, getting them on point, developing relationships. And who wants to do that to have somebody leave 12 months later?
Right. I agree.
Right. And so I think there's a certain currency and I think it's paid too. And I can say point blank that it certainly happens here where, I'm better with them than without them. And I think that goes a long way. I don't think you can build something without having people around you. And I think there's some adages that don't change. And one of them is around loyalty. You want to surround yourself with people that you can trust. You can't
Hmm.
build something if you're constantly in flux. So
Right.
I think that's really, really important. So I think that showing loyalty is both a blessing and a curse. It's probably a curse for some of the people on this call who've been here a long time, where actually they probably could have made more money by leaving and going somewhere else,
Hmm.
right? Um, but I think that again, that goes back to the nuance of what you're comfortable with,
Right.
and you have to look at what's important to you. So at some
Hmm.
point in time, I think everybody look. I have people all the time who work for me who say, "Kurt, so and so left for more money." I'm like, "No shit, really? Who leaves for lateral, right?" Uh, so that's not the reason why they left. That may be
Right.
a factor, but that isn't the only reason. And I guess my point of it is, I think that loyalty plays a big role, and I think it'll play a bigger role now because there's so little of it that when you
Right.
spot somebody that shows a trend of loyalty, there's something there. They clearly want to
So,
be involved in a culture where there's some level of connectivity.
hmm I, I I agree with you. I was with my company for 9.5 years, before I
Yeah,
started Chameleon. So I absolutely believe that. Um, how do people handle, look, we can go into a whole different, we can have another discussion about how companies are sometimes not great treating, they're not great at treating employees who are loyal. And this isn't, we're not here to discuss the employer part because that, it's stuff we can't control. But how do employees sometimes handle loyalty wrong that allow them to get taken advantage of?
I think look, loyalty doesn't mean that you get stepped on, and I think if you're working for an organization that you don't feel valued, well, that's a whole separate conversation, right?
Right.
And I think the one thing that anyone who works for a company needs to do is be their own advocate, just the same way that if you're going to a healthcare provider, if you don't hear an answer that you like and you're still not feeling great, then you go find another doctor or at least be an advocate with your current doctor. I think the same thing applies in the work environment, right? If you don't feel like you're being valued, it doesn't take a whole lot to say to your boss, "Hey, listen, I'd like to talk about what my career looks like.
I
Are
think
you happy with my performance?"
right.
It's the same as the counteroffer conversation. We were talking about this before the call, and it's
Right.
probably a good segue on that, which is,
Hmm.
and maybe some of the folks on this call will be interested in that. Look, I'm not anti counteroffer, but what I am saying is there is some erosion of trust in a counteroffer. That is a reality, right?
Hmm.
And so before you take another job, if you're only leaving because the driving force is money, ask for the raise first.
Right.
You can always go, what's the worst
Yeah.
they're going to say? No,
Right.
right? But to get to a place that you got a counter offer because you didn't ask for the thing that you wanted to begin with, you still are the individual that left the company or cheated, if you will, in the eyes
Hmm.
of some people. And if you can avoid that by just having the open dialogue to say, look, I don't want to leave, but I do really need to talk about my compensation. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that can go a long way.
When we were preparing a few weeks ago, you brought up, and it stuck with me. You brought up with how sometimes people come to a comp negotiation, already being an employee, saying, I researched and I interviewed and I should be making X.
Yeah.
You had some opinions about that
Well,
approach. Do you
yeah.
remember? I don't mean to put you
Uh,
on the
no,
spot.
I actually don't. I don't remember the context of it. So help me out. And
So
I
you were saying that, like, when people come to I want to talk about my comp conversation,
yeah,
you said that they come to me going, I did the research and I should be making 150 and I'm making 120, or,
yeah.
350 and I'm making, 250. And you implied that it was like the wrong way to go about it. And
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things there. Look,
right,
I mean, you are only worth what the company I think thinks you're worth. I mean, I think
right.
that is simply a reality. Although I can't deny that I've had people come to me and I go, you know what, it didn't dawn on me. And you're right. I do need to look at it. I find more times than not they come to you and say they're looking to leave and it was because of salary, and then you're kind of like, well, I've given you every opportunity. Now, I would say on the converse side, I think there's an expectation that employers need to be constantly having conversations with their employees so it never gets to that point. But
Right.
I think there's probably a better way to handle the compensation conversation. I would
Hmm.
say this. I think where we're going is to throw it on people and surprise them never works.
Yeah.
So I've said to folks, put a plan in the calendar that you want to talk to your boss about your compensation. Let them know in advance it's about their compensation. Nobody
Right.
likes to be put on the spot.
It's not a taboo. Right.
It's not taboo. So don't feel uncomfortable about it and say, look, I just want to talk about my compensation if you don't mind and what my
Mhm.
trajectory is potentially in the organization. That's
Right.
unclear to me. I think it opens up a dialogue and look, nobody likes to have that conversation really, especially when you can't do anything about it.
Hmm.
But I can tell you right now, when I have conversations with folks, even if I can't do anything about it at that time, they are in the front of my mind when I can.
Right. It's true.
And
Um,
you know what I mean?
but you bring up a good point, like where you say, the person, as the employer, like you weren't aware that there was a discrepancy or you weren't, on the forefront of it, and it's when they bring it up to you. But again, there's 50 reasons why the employer is doing it wrong, and that's not necessarily to me the point of the chat today. I want to focus on the few things that an employee can be
An advocate.
right, an advocate for themselves is that if you are that underpaid, based on the research, it's easy again to focus on your boss, but like, what's your part in it?
Yeah,
Did you not make them aware that you did X, Y, and Z for the last 3 months and they're just simply
yeah,
unaware of it? Are you not having monthly, weekly meetings or at least regular emails being sent that show what you've been doing? Have you not leveled up in your own education or skill set or problem solving within that are important for the organization? Like, does your LinkedIn profile look like you haven't touched it in 15 years and nobody knows what you're doing? And more importantly, when your LinkedIn profile is not touched in 15 years, you look comfortable. And the reality is people don't put money where they think they're comfortable. It shouldn't be that way. That to me, this is the negative part of loyalty, right? Like if
yeah.
they think you're not leaving, they're going to put the money where somebody else who
I think
is.
so. I
You
think
know what I mean?
so.
It's just human
And
nature.
it's
It
a
shouldn't be that
and
way,
it's a
but
hard balance. It's a hard balance between the squeaky wheel
so look
and not.
internally and see what your part is, right? Again,
Yeah.
don't just only focus on how the employer screwed up. You have to look at your part. And
Yeah,
I think
I think
that's
so.
to
And
me the piece that people have to be, whether they're looking for a job or they're looking for something internally, that's what they have to be take accountability for.
I think you have to take accountability for all of it in the end, right? And you can't sit and wait and hope. If it happens,
Hmm.
great. But I don't think it's unreasonable to be your own advocate. Now, obnoxious, you don't want to be either. I mean, I have some folks that have worked for me and work for me that have their hand out all
Hmm.
the time, and that gets old too,
Hmm. Right.
right? But I do think there's a balance there where, with a very balanced, thoughtful approach, one where you are proactive, but also give them
Hmm.
a sign before you go and sit down with them to say, look, can we have that conversation? That I think people will appreciate way more than the squeaky wheel. But I do
Right.
think you need to be your own advocate, and I do think you need to constantly be looking at what is your value in the market. I mean, I don't know, how many of you live in New Jersey, but I do. I
Hmm.
looked at my house, the value of my house all the time. It's changing. It's all over the place. It's worth knowing.
Right. So are my taxes.
Yeah. And so I think it's worth knowing. Whether I can do anything about it is a whole separate thing. But I think
Right.
it is worth, at the very least, knowing and being educated on that. And but yeah, I think that there are some loyal folks that go, you know what, I'm a little nervous to ever ask. But then they're also they are the same folks that are frustrated that their company's not giving it to them. And I'm not
Well, that's
sure one or the other happens. There needs to be something there.
Yeah, you always need to ask even if you don't get the answer that you want.
Yeah,
You can
agreed.
know that
Agreed.
you'll ask. Do
That's
you
right.
have any insights for, our audience tends to be over 40, over 50. Although age shouldn't matter, we know it does. Like any insights to when you're searching at 60 or job searching at 50, how to handle comp requests where maybe even people assume that you might be expensive, but you may not be for certain reasons, or like just any commentary on that type of
Well, I could tell you, I see more and
situation.
more of individuals who hide their comp, like they're embarrassed by what they earned. Don't
Hmm.
be. Don't be. I mean, I think
Right.
that regardless of what you're willing to accept, if you decided that you wanted to take less because you're at a different place in your journey, don't be
Hmm.
embarrassed by what you earned. Actually, that's the badge of what you delivered, right? And that just validates your what your worth has been. So I think
Right.
that I would tell you more people do that than not. I think
Right.
that you. again, need to have a very open mind, but I think you need to be open in your communication. And if you are applying in some cases for individuals who are applying for jobs that maybe um, in their mind they might think that they're overqualified for, then spell it out rather than acting like you're not. What's wrong with that?
Right.
Listen, I know at this stage in my life I'm probably overqualified for this particular role, but actually the
Right.
reason why it interests me is it's 5 minutes from my house and the following things, right? And I don't think that that is unreasonable. What I'm seeing more and more, and let's go back to that deficit at the leadership level. We're
Right.
seeing more and more that we are looking for professionals who have tenured experience, some cases to fill in gaps, right? 6 months, 12 months, some for full time.
Right.
But the end result is the same, which is there still is shortage. And we're going to
Hmm.
have to find those gaps are going to need to get filled somewhere.
Right.
So, you know, I think there's probably more in the workforce over 50, 60 than ever before for some of those reasons because there is that shortage.
Right.
So I think I would leverage that.
And I think if you're leveraging it as here's the achievements that I can do that are relevant to what you need next, you're going to have a much
Totally.
better perception with, I have 30 years of experience. I mean, like, guess what all 55-year-olds have in common? I'm 55.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all have 30 years of experience. No, it doesn't
Yeah.
qualify any of
Totally.
us for anything, right? Like we all
Totally.
know people with 30 years of experience who are amazing, and we all know people with 30 years of experience who suck. So
Yeah.
which one are you, right? Like you have to be able to speak about your relevancy to what is at hand. That's how you add value and that's how you get further along in the conversation. But if you're just touting your experience without necessarily, and especially if you have a task-driven presentation, either profile, resume, speaking points, you're going to be possibly viewed as somebody who, this is again taboo, you don't want to be viewed as somebody who is in a protected class and expensive without achievements,
Yeah, I think so. And so
right? Because
I wouldn't, yeah,
I mean, look, ageism exists. I'm 100% not denying that it doesn't, but I'm going to tell you also, nobody wants to hire anyone and not have it work out.
yeah, agreed.
But if you are somebody who is, again, 55, who is not coming across achievement driven in your presentation, not to say that you don't have achievements, but you're not promoting it the right way. In this climate of uncertainty, people want to avoid a scenario where there might be firing somebody who's in a protected class simply because they're not doing the job. Nobody's firing you because you're old, typically. I mean, Lord knows there's no excuses for outright ageist jackasses,
Yeah.
right? But so everybody's trying to avoid a situation.
Yeah, I
And
think
that can
so. And
be minimized if you're coming across in an achievement driven way. I don't
I
know. What do
think
you think?
so. And I think that's right. I think it's human nature to be for there to be some level of intimidation. So I think how you present yourself is really important.
Hmm.
Because I think it's more that it's less that they're overqualified often and more that the individuals who are interviewing them are in some cases intimidated, whether they feel threatened or otherwise. And I think
Right.
how you eliminate that through your communication style is super, super important. And how you present yourself, I think is super, super important. And I think those are real factors. I don't think you can ignore them.
No, and I
But I
think,
also think that there's a world out there of organizations that are taking a very different view, including here, where we look, we just want best in class, and if that happens to be a 55-year-old or 54-year-old like myself, no worries. Or it happens
yeah,
to be whatever. It simply doesn't matter at the end of the
it doesn't
day. And
matter.
but yeah, I can't deny that ageism is certainly out there, but I think that there are organizations that would look at it as a huge benefit to get somebody. It's just a matter of understanding who the players are that you'd work for and how you
Right.
develop a relationship with them, that they're comfortable, that they don't feel in some cases threatened by somebody who probably does have more experience than them.
Right. Yeah. Another question I'll ask somebody, our age is like when you were 30, how many 55-year-olds did you hire?
Yeah,
And the
totally.
question often is answered with not many, if not zero, right? Very infrequently is somebody saying, "Oh, at 30, I was always hiring people older than me." And again, it doesn't make it okay. It's just showing the empathy of showing an introspection as to what that person maybe, their insecurities as a manager, managing somebody who's more experienced than them. Like, if you can then factor all that into how you present yourself, you again might be looked at as more less intimidating and more as somebody who would help, right? So it just depends. Like it, but you can't ignore all this stuff and think that we're not, in these emotional,
Yeah, of
non-emotional
course.
compartments, right? Like, I mean, we're all people in the end, flawed and
Yeah, and I
biased
just
and all
think
the
that
things, right?
I think no matter what you do, if you're looking and you're not actively in a job right
Hmm.
now, you just need to kiss a lot of frogs. That's simply the reality.
Yeah,
And you'll find your tribe. You'll find your
right.
group of people. It's out there.
And then the
Not
leverage is easier. Yeah.
then the leverage is easier. But the more frogs you kiss, the more likely you're going to meet somebody who's like-minded. You have things in common. They find your company pleasant, and all of those things factor. And the end result then is you can negotiate in a way that you feel comfortable and authentic because you actually want to go work for this organization. And then you'll have then the next question mark is, where you push and don't push based on how much you want the job or don't.
And
But it all starts with getting the job first.
and you bring up a good point. Like, it's not about being broad and trying to appeal to everyone. It really is about, and it seems counterintuitive, but it's about being specific and taking a stance, because then that strength, people want the strength, and or they're going to appeal to that specificity you're putting out, and then you have leverage. But when you are broad and you're trying to appeal to everybody,
You appeal to
you,
nobody.
you appeal to nobody, and there you
Yeah.
have no leverage. So it becomes
E-
this
Even in
feeding,
search.
downward spiral, right? So like you need to
Yeah.
be specific, even if it seems counterintuitive, because then that's where you get leverage to, you know, um, make the negotiations work more in your favor.
Yeah, right. Look, even in search for us,
Hmm.
we have folks that do very, 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 very specific search work.
Hmm.
And so when I think about the folks that are on this call and they're leveraging their next opportunity, everyone says go back to your network. Well, separate the network for a second. Go back
Right,
to every organization that is similar to the organization that you work for because you already naturally have a skill set that all of those organizations want. And I'm surprised to hear 9 out of 10 times when I talk to somebody, I'll be like, where did you apply? Well, did you apply to organizations that actually do what the company was that you worked for? I mean, that's
right,
just a very obvious thing, but our recruiters do the same thing. That's all they do. We have a practice does nothing but construction. They do 3 skill sets. That's it because there's so much demand in that. They don't need to do any
right.
more skill sets than that.
We call that the Kavik model, being able to build your target list, competitors, associations, vendors, clients,
Yeah.
and something else. I can't remember what the other A is. I'm putting it in the thing, but like
Your power and
that's where
leverage
your
comes
biggest
from.
leverage is, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
If
for
you're,
sure.
out of IBM and you're applying to the Milwaukee Brewers as a Milwaukee resident, well, guess
Yeah.
what? Everybody wants to work for the Brewers, right?
Yeah,
So like,
yeah, totally.
so
Totally.
you have that's again, it comes back to the initial approach, like, where how you're being viewed as somebody, are you a commodity or a unique? And
That's right.
so this has been great. I know we're going to share the Michael Page salary guide. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in the chat, or we'll definitely send it via email.
I'll send
Um,
it out in a little bit.
any little last parting words, or this has been great. Any
I
questions?
genuinely enjoyed it, and I thank everyone for taking the time. I know you're all very busy. I mean, the only thing I would say is all of this around negotiation is about mindset. It's
A
all
lot, yeah,
mindset, and we all have self-limiting beliefs, and if you can let go of those self-limiting beliefs, you'll find your way.
right. No, exactly. That's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for
Thank you
doing
so
this.
much.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you
Take care.
everybody. Take
Good day.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.